Hello everyone, my name is Ryquiz, and today I would like to give you all a primer on a hero that I've been seeing a lot of success with recently, and more importantly, also a hero that I've been having a lot of fun with. My chat calls her Sun Mommy Thunder Thighs, but you might know her as Dawnbreaker, more specifically, Core Dawnbreaker. Now, in this series, I want to take the time to crystallize some of the learnings that I've done with a particular hero over the span of a certain amount of games. I'm thinking of doing these for a few heroes every time I hit a certain milestone in the amount of games played department. For example, after 100 games, such as this one, I think I can do a neat little primer on heroes and help people avoid certain early traps and thus accelerate their learning. And I think that will have them help them have more fun and success on the hero. I plan on revisiting these heroes later on, for example, 250, 500, and even 1,000 games, and, maybe even more, to see if that original guide still holds up and to really delve into some of the more advanced concepts on that specific hero. For this primer, we'll start by introducing her kit, after which we'll discuss her laning, her general playstyle, and then end with her preferred itemization. In a sentence, Dawnbreaker is a strength hero that, as a core, likes to play alone until her team sets up a moment for her to use her ultimate and join the fight or gank. Now, let's shortly talk about her kit. Firstly, her Q, Starbreaker, is a set animation spell where she smashes the chosen area with her hammer. Each swing out of 3 does a set amount of damage, and the last swing also stuns. Both the damage and the stun duration increase with levels in Starbreaker. Her W, Celestial Hammer, allows Dawnbreaker to throw her hammer a certain range. The hammer does damage to every creep or hero that it hits, and after 2 seconds, or earlier, if the spell is pressed again, the hammer flies back towards Dawnbreaker, whilst leaving a trail of slowing and damaging fire that will last for 2.5 seconds. Now, if Dawnbreaker does press the spell, whilst the hammer is already thrown away from her, she and the hammer will fly towards each other and meet in the exact middle. The hammer that flies back will also do damage again, so it's pretty similar to Razor's Q or Plasma Field in that way. You can hit a unit twice by first throwing it and then calling it back right away. The range plus damage of the passing hammer will increase with levels. Her E, Luminosity, is a passive spell that works a lot like Slardr's Bash mechanic. Every 4th hit, Dawnbreaker hits with a critical hit. The damage done by this attack heals Dawnbreaker and nearby allies for a percentage of the damage hit she dealt with this critical hit. Note, however, that hitting creeps provides 50% less damage than hitting actual enemy heroes. Lastly, her ult, Solar Guardian, is a global ability that is cast on an allied hero. This also includes Dawnbreaker herself. Now, when she initiates the spell, Dawnbreaker channels a jump towards that allied hero, which can be interrupted by stuns and silences. Now, when she's channeling, there will be a large circle placed around the hero where she will land. This circle heals allies and also burns enemy heroes. Now, when she lands, all enemies in that circle are stunned for 1.5 to 2 seconds, depending on the level of Solar Guardian. Now that we've got the gist of her kit, we can talk a little bit about her laning. Dawnbreaker is a pretty solid laner that is scary the moment that she hits level 2 and she spikes at level 3. At level 2, she unlocks her bread and butter combo of diving onto an enemy with her Celestial Hammer and then using the slow from the fire to set up for her Starbreaker hits. Because of this combo, she has a lot of burst damage, and the moment she is level 3 and has any sort of mana item, she becomes a menace in the lane. Because of this, she likes laning with ranged 4s that help her either set up her full combo or do a lot of damage when she's going in for the combo. Dawnbreaker usually plays decently close to her support to threaten a jump at any opportunity. In the lane, she will max her W, Celestial Hammer, by going 1-3-1 and then her ult. This is because her W is her most efficient farming spell, as well as her escape/initiation early on. Once she has her ult, level 6, she can look around the map/ask her teammates to set up a fight. Early on, her ult is very strong, as it is hard to burst through the healing in the early stages of the game, so use your first ultimate wisely. Now, let's talk a little bit about her playstyle. Early on, Dawn plays to dominate her lane and ult into a fight when it is a good fight. A good fight for Dawnbreaker is a fight where she can either save an allied hero, or when there is enough follow-up catch from allies nearby to keep enemies close to where Dawn is ulting in. Now, in the mid-game, she farms up in a side lane or one of the jungles, whilst waiting for an opportunity to use her ult. She needs to be very wary of enemies trying to come and gank her, because Dawnbreaker is in the game, it makes all of her allies less tempting to gank because you can just ult in. And when she's pushing side lanes, she's also constantly visible to the opponent, making them even more likely to start ganking you. Now, until you have sufficient damage, you'll probably be using Celestial Hammer to push out waves. Celestial Hammer, her W, almost one-shots a wave, and you can do so without approaching the wave too much. So you'll find yourself using it a lot when cutting waves during nighttime, for example. Dawnbreaker can usually get plenty of farm, since she's rarely out of position because of her ult. Now in lane, she really hates heavy harassing heroes. Think about Drow Ranger, think about Lifestealer, maybe Jakiro, and so on. This is because Dawn doesn't like to build into a lot of sustain. Now in the game, Dawnbreaker hates a few categories of heroes. Firstly, she hates heroes that easily cancel her ult. Think about Nyx Assassin or Silencer. They both have tools to instantaneously cancel her ult. She also doesn't like BKB piercing stuns from heroes such as Pudge, Beastmaster, Vengeful Spirit, etc. Because they counter her shard combo, and she heavily relies on her BKB to get in and out of fights. She also doesn't really like playing against a lot of elusive heroes. Think about Juggernaut, Faceless Void, the Spirits, Weaver, or even Sniper in some games. These heroes can easily get out of her combo, and then she's just kind of sitting there, as a sitting duck. And then lastly, she also doesn't really like it when her opponents have a lot of burst. Thinking about like Tusk, Lina, PA type heroes, maybe even Tiny, because they make her ult feel useless. Because every time she ults in, the target just dies, even though she's trying to heal them. Now, as Dawnbreaker, you're usually fine in playing into some of these, but you don't want to stack all of these up, because then you make the game really hard for yourself. And lastly, I want to talk about itemization on Dawn a little bit, which can be fairly diverse. She can build a lot of items very comfortably, but in pubs, I usually forgo building any of the aura-type items, such as Vlad's, Pipe, or Greaves, since they rely on your team being useful. So the first question that I usually ask myself in a Dawn game is this a Desolator game? Now, if yes, you're building Phase Boots, then a mana item, and then we build into Deso, and then Shard, BKB, Blink, in any order. The mana item is usually a Soul Ring, because she can sustain her HP pool using her passive, but in harass heavy lanes, she'll probably opt for a Falcon Blade instead. Now, after building the aforementioned items, Dawn is pretty much online. And then she can start building any problem-solving items, such as Hex, AC, Abyssal Blade, Lotus Orb, etc. Now, in the mid-game, you want to get your shard early, if the opponent have a lot of ways of interrupting your Q combo, such as using the Cold Snap on Invoker, point-and-click disables, such as Witch Doctor or Lion, or Malefice by Enigma, to name a few. Now, you want to get your blink early if you really have to follow up one of your teammates' initiations in fights, and you can still kind of guarantee that you're very likely to get your combo off without dying or interrupted after you've blinked in. If this is not the case, you should probably get your BKB first and rely on your Celestial Hammer to close the gap until you can actually afford the blink. Now, in most games, you'll probably end up building Desolator, Shard, then Blink, then BKB, but it really depends on how well your game is going, what your teammates are doing, what your opponents are doing, etc. Now, if it's not a Desolator game, you are probably going to be building an Echo Saber. Echo Saber builds very nicely into BKB, which is super nice for the games where you have to start the fights and be like more of a frontliner instead of the farm in the side lanes and then ult in later type of hero. Some games you just can't afford to be a budget Spectre. Now, this will usually result into Phase Boots plus Soul Ring, into Echo Saber, into BKB, then Mage Slayer, then Blink, then Shard. And after that, you can look into getting either a Bloodthorn to disable key heroes, or continue with a regular AC Basher type follow-up. I'd like to quickly mention Radiance. In some specific games, it can be really good to build a Radiance, such as versus Phantom Lancer or multiple right-clicking cores on the enemy team. It's honestly a niche option, and basically means that you'll be farming for about the first 20 minutes of the game, but I think it's very strong in the right games. The Mischance Aura is honestly very sick. It's just sadly gated behind a expensive low stat item. Sad. Now, this will see you going Brown Boots into mana item, kind of optional, then Radiance, then Phase Boots and BKB, after which you also get your Shard. You probably don't want to see yourself fighting before you have that BKB, unless it's a really good opportunity to ult in, for example. After that, you usually build into whatever the game needs, which will be either a Blink or an AC, most likely. Now, please, don't do this when you're having a rough lane or if your team is losing all their lanes, because you will just be griefing your team very hard. Lastly, we'll wrap this up by quickly talking about the talents. For the 10th talent, we want to take the Starbreaker damage, because it's a lot of damage to get early, and Starbreaker is your main source of damage, and, well, the extra hammer slow just isn't very good. For the 15th level, we usually take the 50% crit talent, but in some games you might want to consider the minus 20 seconds on your Solar Guardian cooldown when you really value the higher uptime of your ult that game. For level 20, we usually take the one less hit to crit because it makes our Starbreaker always crit, and the Solar Guardian radius is already big enough by itself, so you really don't need the extra radius ever. And then at level 25, we get the 2 Starbreaker charges because it's absolutely busted with her Shard. With her Shard, you're basically immune for the entire duration of any team fight. Also, the hammer range increase is very cool, but it's just never worth picking over the Starbreaker charges, as Cordon. So this concludes the primer on Dawnbreaker. Dawnbreaker is a very fun hero because she gets to farm a lot while still joining plenty of fights. And she also builds into a lot of damage because more damage is more healing for herself and her team. So if you like the sound of smacking people around with a big ol' hammer, I recommend you give Dawnbreaker a shot. Thank you all for watching, and until we meet again, cheers.